Funding for Election 2014 coverage is provided in part by AARP, a nonprofit, nonpartisan association, 86,000 strong in North Dakota. AARP fights on real issues that matter to you and your family. And by the members of Prairie Public.
Welcome to our continuing coverage of election 2014. I'm Dave Thompson. Thanks for joining us. Today it's the Secretary of State's debate, and we have our three candidates with us. First is Democrat April Fairfield. Next is Republican Al Jaeger. And third, Libertarian Roland Reimers. We will start with 1-minute opening statements from our candidates. April Fairfield drew the lucky straw.
Well, thank you so much. And I want to thank AARP and the members of Prairie Public for hosting this conversation. It's very important for the people of North Dakota. And I would also like to thank Mr. Reimers and Mr. Jaeger as well for their willingness to step forward and lead the people of North Dakota. My philosophy on public service is simple. You do the job people elected you to do. That means as North Dakota's chief election and business officer, you don't close your office to catch up on paperwork, you don't overspend millions of dollars on an IT project, and you make sure the public is well served. As North Dakota's chief election officer, you make sure ballots are properly written, that every candidate's name is listed, that servicemen and women get their ballots on time, and voters are properly informed of their rights. And you defend every voter's sacred right to vote, never pursuing any agenda that narrows those rights. I'm running for Secretary of State because North Dakotans deserve better. After 22 years of mismanagement and mistakes, it's time for new leadership.
Thank you. Next up will be Al Jaeger.
Well, thank you, Dave. It's good to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity. Also thank Prairie Public and AARP for the opportunity. When I first decided to run for Secretary of State, I looked at the duties of the office, and I realized that what I do well, the talents and skills that I have, really matched up very well with the office. And I haven't been disappointed in all this time. It really is work that I enjoy. I enjoy the duties, everything that has to do with the Secretary of State's office. And I enjoy it, and I'm very comfortable with it, and I think I do it well.
Thank you. Now, Roland Reimers.
Hi, I'm Roland Reimers, the Libertarian candidate for Secretary of State. Libertarians are basically for smaller government and more freedom. With that said, I think it's important for any public official, no matter what the office, to come up and say what they really stand for in all the important issues of an election. And I don't see this in my opponents, but for my part, if you look at the measures that are on this year's ballot, I strongly oppose Measure 1, the anti-abortion amendment to the state constitution, and I strongly support this Measure 6, the shared parenting initiative that I think is badly needed in the state of North Dakota. With that, let's continue with the debate.
All right, thank you all very much. We want to start our questioning, and we'll go to Al Jaeger first. Al, it has been brought up already about the voter ID laws, the new laws which were passed in the 2013 session, that there's been some complaint from some groups saying it's made it harder for people to vote. They don't necessarily object to the ID, but some of the forms of ID they do object to. Do you think that the law is working, and does it need to be changed?
There might be some necessary tweaks that will be needed, but we have to keep in mind that voter ID has been a part of North Dakota law since the 2003 session. And so North Dakotans have been quite accustomed to using voter ID, using it in quite a few election cycles. The main change that the legislature made last time had to do with the removal of the voter's affidavit. It was really a self-identification, self-certification that you are who you are, you live where you are. And so that was really the main change. And so other than that, it's pretty much what it has been all along in terms of the requirements. We have a very aggressive voter campaign out there, voter education campaign, easy as pie, because we really believe voting in North Dakota is easy as pie. We've been working very hard in educating the public, and I think, with the November election coming up, I think we're going to be very pleased in terms of how it works out. The voter's affidavit was only used by less than 3% of the people, and so essentially we do have everyone covered.
Now to Roland Reimers, your opinion.
Yeah, well, I'm more concerned with the quality of vote than the number of people who are actually voting. And then we started out this country with the idea that people should have some stake in the community that they're voting in before they were allowed to vote. I mean, when 200 years ago, unless you're a property owner and a male wage earner, you don't get to vote. And we've gone to, I think, the other extreme right now. I would object to, like, one of the forms acceptable for the ID is a student ID card. Well, most students are driving while they're in this state. They're required by state law to have a North Dakota driver's license after 30 days. So I don't see any real problem why they can't get a North Dakota driver's license as required by law. And if they don't have a driver's license, they should be able to easily get a state ID, which costs $8, and that verifies their residency, and that verifies that they're committed to the North Dakota community and not just passing through. So I would strongly support limiting these various IDs that don't show an address and don't show a commitment to actually reside in the state of North Dakota.
April Felfrey, your response.
Well, it's certainly true that what Secretary Jager said, that we have had a voter ID requirement since 2003. However, the elimination of the affidavit provision he mentioned it was 3% of the vote. However, that translates to 10,500 people that use the affidavit provision. If there was an issue or any question about whether there was fraud involved, then those could have been made into provisional ballots. Taking away the affidavit provision was not the appropriate measure, and in fact, taking away that provision actually made our voter ID laws one of the most restrictive in the nation. Out of 2.5 or some such number of votes, million votes cast in the previous elections, there had only been one case of voter fraud that was actually taken to court. So to say that we needed to do this to protect ourselves from voter fraud is completely an illegitimate argument. And the fact is that we have had people turned away from the polls because of this. By the Secretary's own numbers, we had between 30 and 50 people turned away in Rowlett County in the primary election. So really the argument that we needed to have this was absolutely not necessary. There are some things that can and should be tweaked, and it's within the Secretary of State's power right now to do that. He could expand and he could open that up to make sure that people aren't disenfranchised. So I would like to see that happen right now. Furthermore, and I just want to close on this, one of the things I've been very concerned about, and actually some county auditors, as far as I know, have been requesting information as to whether an ID has to be valid. A driver's license or a non-driver's license has to be valid in order to vote, because people have been turned away because it's been expired. And we're still waiting to hear a ruling from the Secretary of State's office as to whether that, it's certainly not in the law. No rules were promulgated for it, so I'd like to know where that came from.
Al Jager, your response then.
Well, actually, voting has, the whole thing about the voter's affidavit, yes, there was 10,500 people that used the affidavit. And the concern is, in the process that was set up, there was really no way of really verifying whether or not they were qualified voters. And so with the system that we had in place, it was very difficult to determine whether there was people voting that shouldn't be voting or vice versa. And so just the perception that there could be something wrong really was a concern. And whenever you have a perception that an election is not being conducted the way it should be conducted, that raised a concern with the legislature. And so we worked with the legislature to make sure that we had a system in place that would cover virtually every voter. And we do. We have everything covered. That's why we have the Easy as Pie voting campaign, because essentially all they need to do is to get on our website, and they're very easily be able to get the identification that they need. And something that's so important to voting, We should know if people are qualified to vote. They need identification for virtually everything in this country, and voting, one of our most sacred rights, certainly deserves the scrutiny that people who vote, cast their vote, are indeed qualified voters.
Mr. Reimers, would you like to chime?
Yes, I somewhat agree with Al that these affidavits really couldn't be verified. So saying that there's a small amount of fraud really means nothing because you can't really tell. And again, it only costs $8 to get a state ID card, and it only takes 1 day to get it. So why should it be a hassle? If you're really serious about voting, go get a state ID card.
April Fairfield, get the last word.
You know, I mean, having a problem of perception is really absolutely no good reason to go about and possibly disenfranchise voters. The reality is that you do need an ID to get on an airplane or check out a book from the library, but those are not our fundamental rights. And voting is. And to say that we had to get rid of this because there was the potential, there could have been other ways to have fixed that. As I said, we could have made those provisional ballots instead. The fact that we needed to do this for some problem of perception is just, it's not a good argument at all.
Okay, we're going to the next topic now, and we'll start with Roland Reimers. And this has to do with the idea that the Secretary of State's office has reported that the number of business filings for corporate filings has gone way up, and he's asking for new staff. And there was some talk about him taking some time to close the office certain hours, certain days to catch up. If you're elected Secretary of State, would you support the idea of hiring more staff to get the workload done?
Well, if I were Secretary of State, one thing I'd look at is possibly privatizing some of these mundane duties. When you get a big influx of applications, if you cannot farm out to a private organization or a company some of the more mundane things, and let the Secretary of State's office just finish up the final paperwork. And secondly, I would also look at seeing if we can't eliminate some of these various applications. I know I'm a property owner in Grand Forks, North Dakota. If I want to do some minor repairs on my building, I have to have a contractor's license to work on my own property, to do a couple $100 worth of repairs. I think that's ridiculous. We want too many licenses for too many things. Let's narrow it down to the important things and make sure the people who do get contractor's license or business licenses are qualified to do so, and that's the important thing.
April Fairfield, go ahead.
Well, I actually support the Secretary asking for the additional FTEs, full-time equivalents. I believe it was 6 that he requested, and I think that he requested 3 in the previous biennium, and I think that that was necessary to take care of the volume of work. My argument has been that it was late in coming. In 2012, the Secretary actually shut his office because he couldn't get the volume of work done instead of going and asking for the 3 FTEs up front. And then my second concern about it is this: if technology were online, if the technology project that his office has been working on for the past 10 years were actually working, the office was, and the online system was streamlined and modernized, perhaps there wouldn't be the need for as many new full-time equivalents, and perhaps the work would be getting done in a timely manner.
Okay. Al Jaeger, go ahead.
Well, I need to correct Roland on one thing. An individual working on their own property does not need a contractor's license. The second thing, in terms of the number of business registrations that we have had in our in our office, people need to be aware of the budget cycle. It's on a two-year budget cycle, and so for the last biennium, we had to submit our budget request in 2010. The first spike that we had in our office happened in the summer of 2011. That was the summer where Minot had floods, where Bismarck, Fargo all had flooding concerns, and that's when we had our first spike. The second huge spike was in the summer of 2012. And yes, we did close the office for 3 days. And the reason we closed the office is to increase productivity. And it really worked great. It was one of the best decisions that we made. It took so much pressure off of staff that I have that's very excellent in what they do. And it worked out extremely well. We were able to get caught up, and we've been working very well since then. So it really is something that is one of those decisions that we make. We didn't compromise customer service. In fact, what we did is we bettered customer service. And anytime I can do that, in fairness to the people that use the services of our office, I wouldn't hesitate again to do the same thing if I was in the same situation. It was one of the wisest decisions that we made.
I want to follow up on that because the computer situation was brought up about the computer project. And we're going to start with April Fairfield. You have been kind of critical about the pace of it. If you were Secretary of State, what would you do?
Well, I think that the first thing that we have to do is get an idea of where we are with the project. This, of course, has been going on. I think the first requests were made in 2004. We've certainly seen the office go back and ask for more appropriations. There have been companies that have not done the work, and then they contracted again. I mean, there have just been a number of issues with the technology project. And of course, I think the original appropriation was just under $2 million. Well, we're up upwards of $9 million now, and I understand that it will request another $3 million probably, and there's still no end in sight for this project. So I think that what we really have to do first and foremost is get a comprehensive audit of this project to see where we are, what needs to be done. Certainly the legislature didn't feel confident. They took the project out of the Secretary of State's office and had them partner with ITD to get this done, so we're hoping it's on track now. The second part is there are no formal performance measures in the office for getting these things done. So I think that would be the second step, is to make sure that there are performance measures in place. And finally, in terms of you know, making the same decision again to close the office, as Secretary Jager mentioned before, they racked up 13,000 of overtime hours in the first part of the biennium. I don't think by anyone's estimation that is a working system. So
Let's move to Al Jager and your response.
Well, the progress of our software project is very well documented in terms of how it's gone. We started out with never receiving enough funding. We ran into a situation where through a competitive bidding process, a company was selected, had a very large search committee, and they ran into financial problems. And then the Information Technology Department of the state took over the project, and they are on record with the Legislative IT Committee that they completely underestimated the project in terms of its complexity, because we have a very complex office with many different duties. And so there's a lot of interconnectivity that needs to take place. And so the project right now, in terms of with the financial figures that Ms. Fairfield quoted, are incorrect. But we are continuing on. We're working on many different options. The whole thing is that it's easy to point fingers at me for being responsible. It's very clear in terms of the documentation. There's a lot of other people that we rely on in this project. So it's very frustrating that it has taken as long as it has. Also, under state law now, for well over a year, all projects with state government are under a steering committee. So I no longer have sole control over this particular project. I only have one vote that is on a steering committee. And so we are moving forward. It is something that we've recognized that has been needed for a long time. But there are things that have happened that are out of our control, and we react to them in the best possible way that we can based on the information that we have available at a certain point in time.
Mr. Reimers, please.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to disagree with Al as far as his statement that I was wrong on the contractor's license issue. I own a number of commercial properties in Grand Forks, and every time I turn around and want to do work, the city building inspector says, you have to have a contractor's license. So I've numerous times have had experience getting a contractor's to sign off on work I had to do on my own property. Now, private property, you don't have to be a contractor yet, but it's probably coming one of these days. As far as the this computer system in the Secretary of State's office, hey, what's new? Look at Obamacare. Their computers didn't work for many, many months, and they've worked on that for how long? So doesn't surprise me that the computer system doesn't work. That seems to be the norm these days. But speaking of the computer system, one of the things I'd like to see Al put in his computer system is a actual voter guide of the candidates appearing on the ballot. If I want to look up who I want to vote for Congress, I can look up the name and the address and maybe the website on his computer service, but no information. There's no reason each candidate couldn't have one page of information they provide that if you go to, say, Jack Seaman, Libertarian for Congress, push the little button and there's a page with all the information so people who are voting who want to be informed can easily get that information on the individual candidates, not go searching off many other sources.
There's a different topic I want to introduce now. It's one of the duties of a Secretary of State is to sit on the State Land Board, or the Board of University and School Lands. And the oil boom has really affected that too. I'd like to ask Al Jaeger, as a land board member, are there changes you'd like to see in what the money is used for?
Well, actually, we have continually evaluated our investments over the years. It's very interesting that it took North Dakota about 122 years to reach $1 billion in assets in the school trust fund. The proceeds from that school trust fund are used to fund schools in North Dakota. We have a very strong fiduciary responsibility. The Land Board over the last year and a half, 2 years, it actually will be the third time that we've done it over the time that I've been in office, but has completely reevaluated its investments and make sure that we are following the fiduciary responsibilities that we have. Right now we're dealing with $3 billion in assets, and it's very important. We have things in place. Several years ago we actually put on a constitutional measure to make sure that going forward that the predictability in terms of the resources that we're able to provide to the legislature, who then provides it to the school systems, is done. It really has worked extremely well. We've done very well with the school board. When they had the downturn just a few years ago, our investments stayed strong. And so we've really done extremely well working for the students of North Dakota.
Mr. Reimers.
Well, in regards to all these boards and commissions and whatnot the Secretary of State serves on, I think there are actually way too many. I mean, Al's like on a boxing commission. What does Al know about the boxing business in North Dakota? It seems like every time the state has a little duty they have to have done, well, who do we appoint? Well, let's put the Secretary of State in charge of that. I think that they should probably narrow the duties of the Secretary of State. Maybe he doesn't even need to be on the land board. Except Al has some experience in real estate, so I suppose that's a good idea, but that's all I have, the thoughts on that.
April Fairfield, what do you think?
Well, the position on the land board is very important. And of course, when you have funds like the school trust fund that Secretary Jaeger was talking about, and you have those amounts growing to the level they're growing, I think that you have to be concerned and aware that there might be those in the legislature who want to try and start making some changes there, or trying to make changes about those trust funds. So I think that being on the land board is an extremely important position in terms of safeguarding those funds to make sure that that they are where they are. I actually agree with Secretary Jaeger about that. And I think that one of the areas of the land board, the impact grants that the land board runs through, is another way that the impact in oil country and the money that is being granted back to counties is such an important issue for us right now. So it's important to have an advocate that stands for providing the impact grants that are needed in the western part of the state.
All right, well, we've come to the time where we have to have you do your closing statements. And we begin with Roland Reimers. You have about 40 seconds.
40 seconds, wow. Well, I guess I would encourage the voters to vote Libertarian. I mean, if you want a politician who will work for smaller government, not just expanding offices and not just expanding taxes and expenditures, look at voting Libertarian this year. We're a growing party, and we're going to get even bigger as the years come along. And I certainly would appreciate your vote as Secretary of State in this year's election. Thank you.
All right. April Fairfield, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, first of all, again, I want to thank you for this opportunity, and it's been such an honor for me to run for this office and be able to have this conversation with the people of North Dakota. I just wanted to end by saying that the Secretary of State's office is such an important office. No matter what candidate that you're interested in or you support the elections process, they have to be run fairly and equitably and by the law. Mistakes simply can't be made. With initiated measure, the same thing. Language has to be correct on ballot measures. And quite frankly, if you went to work and you told your boss that you were 10 years late on your project and almost $7 million over budget, you probably wouldn't have a job the next time. So I think that we really need to take a look at making some changes in the Secretary of State's office. After 22 years, if you can't get it right, perhaps you should move on.
Al Jaeger gets the last word.
Well, thank you, Dave. I appreciate the opportunity of being here. Well, I think I have done it right for 22 years. We've done an excellent job in terms of what we've done. My record speaks for itself. You know, one of the things that there's a quote that Brynhild Hauglund used to say, you know, if you don't care about who gets credit for the results, you can get a lot done. And over the 22 years, we have done a lot of that. There are so many different things that we have proposed, sponsored by legislators, all kinds of things that we have done that have quietly made a difference, a positive difference in the lives of the people of North Dakota. And I think we've done it well. We've got great bipartisan support over the years. We've really worked well, and I hope that the people concur with what we've done and what our record stands for.
Well, I would like to thank our three candidates, April Fairfield, Al Jaeger, Roland Reimers, for this debate. They're running for Secretary of State. Remember to vote on November 4th. For Prairie Public, I'm Dave Thompson.
Funding for Election 2014 coverage is provided in part by AARP, a nonprofit, nonpartisan association, 86,000 strong in North Dakota. AARP fights on real issues that matter to you and your family. And by the members of Prairie Public.